Watkins is a proud sponsor of this episode of Foods That Matter.
From Kurtco Media.
Foods That Matter is a podcast that transports the epicures, the foodies, and the adventurers to unique edges of the earth with legendary food archaeologist John Robert Sutton. Now, let's see where in the world John is today.
Beautiful day in Southern California. I'm at the Bologna wetlands here. And it's kind of moist. Why? It rained. So we had these beautiful rains. And with that rain, out comes flowers and little bugs and butterflies. And oh yeah, look at this. If you look down here, you'll see these snails. These are decollate. These are from North Africa, and they're an invasive species here in Southern California. Speaking of Africa, I just flew in from Ghana yesterday. Hey everybody, this is John Sutton, just traveling through the streets of Ghana. And you got to understand that there are certain things that I need to do quickly, and this is how it's done. And Ghana is a West African country, and really one of the big things that come out of Ghana is shea butter. And shea butter is something that so many people use for your skin, for your hair. If you don't, you should, because it's one of the best natural products in the world for that use of your skin and your hair. And it comes from the shea nut. And that nut has a lot of fatty acids in it. So when they boil that nut, all those fats rise to the top, they skin it off. And why does it matter? Because shea is literally the name of that tree from the local language going back thousands of years. They can eat the nut and use it for not only cuisine, the local West African cuisine, but also for ceremonial purposes. So it has a deep-rooted history in that. Remember, there weren't pharmaceutical companies 200, 300, 400, 500 years ago. So those natural shea butter oils and the actual butter was used on the skin. That matters, because from there, the British learned that this was something natural, and then they brought it to Britain in the 1840s, was the first really known use of shea butter. So I was there looking and sourcing for shea butter, the best high quality shea butter that's used in products all over the world today. And join us, come to the next episode of Foods That Matter.
Coming up on the show.
Why should we care about seafood?
I believe the health of our ocean, which gives us about a sixth of the air that we breathe, 1 billion people who rely upon it as their primary source of protein, and its inherent nature and importance to our food system, planet health, survival, it's all tethered.
This is John Sutton, everybody, with Foods That Matter. I'm here with Chef Matthew Dolan of 25 Lusk here in San Francisco. And this is one of San Francisco's renowned chefs, 30 years in the business, Culinary Institute of America graduate.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here. It's good to see you again. It's been a little while.
It's been a little while.
Tough to keep up with you and your globe trotting, but you know where to find me, so I'm honored and flattered to be here with you.
I appreciate it. And I know that you're published in sustainable seafood. You have several books, and in my opinion, one of the true greats in that subject matter. And can we talk about sustainability and seafood, and what have you seen over the years? Where have you seen this in 30 years?
The book that I wrote and published, I've contributed to some other publications, but Simply Fish is mine. And my wife did the photography, and she did a great job. But the impetus behind it was really, we have a dependency on land protein, and easing off of the dependence of like beef and pork and chicken. That we could lean a little bit more on sustainable seafood. Then not only is it a healthier diet overall, I think it adds a little bit more variety and it's more interesting. And also, you've got a lot of people, local fishermen, that could use your support. But really, from a food system standpoint, taking what is renewable, not depleting any stocks or species, because then we're disrupting ecosystems. And as a chef, you get a little bit older, and it's not about how cool is my food or am I getting good reviews, or you start to realize that your impact. You start to realize how much you actually consume and how much you waste. And if you have a beating heart, you realize that you should do something about it, and make the right selections.
Chef and I met. There's a great Ronald Taylor. He has a company that builds restaurants all across the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. And his son Elliot and I were traveling the world looking for ingredients, and we had gone to Sri Lanka. And this was kind of just after the Civil War had ended, where they say that boats hadn't gone offshore, that fish died of old age off there. So
Wild.
we had found these fishermen that used sustainable long line caught tuna, and we had come and presented you this, and we were flying tuna in from Sri Lanka, and that's kind of how we met.
It was a no-fly zone, wasn't it? That the boats, planes, nothing could go that way.
Yeah, nothing
in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, for many, many years, boats couldn't go off the island fishing because they were seen as, attackers from the different factions that were fighting each other.
And you and Elliot decided that you're just going to go there and get on a boat and check it out.
When I was there at the fish markets, all these incredible large tuna would come in, and there were the Japanese, that were flying it directly at it right into the markets in Japan. And in San Francisco here, what is considered local seafood? Like, what can somebody in this city go to their local market and buy, knowing it's from the waters offshore? There's
the unsung hero of the San Francisco Bay is the rock cod. And I think that they get a bad rap. Some people think rock cod, they think, it's like fried something in some crappy little fish joint in some tourist area. This stuff is gorgeous. Mm-hmm. It's lean, it's tender. I love them. And they're so easy to scale, and they're so easy to cut them down the middle and plop them open, even throw them on the grill whole. Dungeness crab when it's in season, that's another one. I mean, it's the coolest of the crabs.
It's delicious.
But again, we talk about sustainability, and for the past couple of years, the seasons have been altered by the migratory patterns of whales. And the local fisherman respects that, and it's mandated that the season opens and closes, so they have to fish something else. And I mean, one thing I left out, go up to Marin County and Point Reyes, Tamales Bay, you have the oyster. One oyster filters 50 freaking gallons of seawater every day. They're brilliant. There's no bycatch. They're delicious. They're an aphrodisiac. At least I felt for that.
Yeah.
I think there's too many people that are employed at the policy level, and they believe that that's how change is impacted. Mm-hmm. You could spend, don't get me going at the Food Recovery Act of 2014, 16, 18, 20, when you have celebrities try to push this thing through to make some of the same laws about food waste and about, proper selection and how we can care for our food system. But it can't go through. And there's just not enough general interest, I suppose, or there isn't enough that feeds a political agenda. So I don't think policy level. I think it's those of us on the street making sustainable choices.
And that's what I wanted to say. I think it's time for the individual to do something about this than waiting for elected officials to somehow solve all this stuff overnight. And how would somebody look and make those choices as an individual when purchasing seafood? Are you looking at a certain company, or are you just, talking to your local chef about it? Because it's so important people realize this fact.
I think a lot of people are frightened to cook fish.
I was just thinking that and saying that. I think people are so scared to death to cook fish, but you have a book that actually walks them through and gets those fears out of them. So what is something somebody can do to be able to take fish and cook it and not worry?
Well, in the certain fish you can cook with their skin on, and a lot of people think that might be gross, but I disagree. You can rely upon this skin to kind of create a barrier. So the salmon family of fishes are a really good example, and you dry it out, you season it. I think the real thing is don't be afraid and take a chance. Get in there and, The skin-on method is great, but the whole fish thing, that's what I'm trying to turn people onto, because if you cook a whole fish on the grill, in the oven, and just watch it, and you see that it's kind of like almost getting there, and you cheat a little bit, and this is what I tell everyone. I taught cooking classes here in the city, and I've done some workshops. I'm a big fan of cheating.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't know what you're doing, cut it open, have a look.
Yeah.
And especially with seafood, it's gonna cook faster than you think it will. So keep an eye on it, cheat, pull it out, let it hang out for a second. There's no harm in flashing it a little bit to get a little more heat on it.
So you can really see, Chef Dolan, people think chefs are just sitting in the kitchen, just dealing with stuff comes their way. But no, there's all this knowledge, all of this international understanding of where these ingredients come from. And I've been accused of kind of the guy that has brought the paints to Picasso, where I've traveled around the world. No one knows who the paint dealer is, but, bringing you all these incredible ingredients, you create a beautiful palette of art after that. And I just want people to understand that, because they don't really know the sophistication that chefs are today.
They also probably don't appreciate what chefs appreciate about what you do. There's a demand out there. The only reason I'm still in the game is there's a couple of things that I need that are not local. So you have these chefs that are like, oh no, we're only local. It's local this, local that. I'm like, oh really? How's that vanilla ice cream treating you? Because vanilla, how's the cinnamon you're using?
Yes.
You still using black and or white pepper? Because none of that's local. Coffee, I know one coffee producer in California, and I would select another coffee producer. It must die.
Yeah.
Having to stay in the game, I need to meet demand, and it's people like you that are out there finding this stuff. You're making it available and giving me this myriad of colors to paint.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, what's happened in the air travel industry is a lot of people have to pay for luggage. So people don't want to pay for checked-in baggage, so they make carry-on. So what has that done in the last 10 years? It's opened up the bellies of all of these airplanes to put food and ingredients in, because that plane has to go at a certain fixed cost every single time, whether it's loaded or not. So now you have all of this air freight transportation that's actually allowed to bring things in from all over the world that never was that way before. What do you think about the octopus? What have you heard? What about it locally? Do you see a lot more people eating it? Are they afraid of it? Do you like it?
I love octopus, and I'm willing to fight this fight because I do serve octopus.
Okay.
There are those that say the IQ of the octopus is equal or potentially greater than that of the human, that there are, I can't remember how many species of octopuses there are on the planet, only one of them. They all have venom, but only one of them can kill us. But their numbers are not depleted, and especially the pot-caught and trap-caught octopuses. I used to say octopi, then I found out it's octopuses. It's just octopi made sense. They're not in danger as a population. And they're delicious. The problem is I wish people would stop messing them up, because there's a couple ways to cook them. And there's these Italians and Spanish and Portuguese folks that drive these trucks, like cement mixers, onto the beach. And they beat the hell out of these things and then freeze them right away. And if you cook them briefly in their own liquid and then just do a slow poach after that, they're like butter. It's amazing.
Wow. In Tunisia, they had washing machine with golf balls.
Oh, that's
and they were bringing all the octopus in and tenderizing.
Same
them
idea, yeah, I love it.
It's like ingenuity.
That's so much smarter than this. Easier to get a washing machine than a cement truck. No, that's awesome. That's incredible.
The problem is you see these movies come out where they humanize the octopus. There was this documentary about a diver, and then people got all sad, and that goes into, even food like rabbit, where, if you look at a rabbit does not eat the same food that humans do. It's a totally separate food chain, and they drink an enormous a less amount of water than any other thing do. It rapidly produces, and it's a great protein.
Yeah, their gestation period is really short, isn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
And they eat alfalfa, which we cannot eat or digest, and it's a big dish in Italy, and it's a big dish in the Eastern European countries, but here, I was bringing it in, and they are actually protesting at stores when they were serving the rabbit. We had to shut it down.
And they'd go out and eat commodity beef for lunch because that's okay.
Yeah. And did you serve rabbit?
I did. Yeah. A little pushback.
Yeah.
Same people.
My dad in the 30s worked at this store, and they put horse meat into the regular meat. And it's like, well, where did that come from? And he remembers when there were still a lot of horses in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And at that time, there were tons of horses around, and, they would just mix a little bit in with the beef, and they don't do that anymore because there aren't horses pulling things around the city. But can you imagine back then?
Yeah, I don't think it mattered as much back then. I mean, there's still places, come on, there are places in the world where they eat horse.
Yeah, in Malta, it's a delicacy.
Okay.
So you go there, and there's horse on all the menus, and also in Sicily, there's just horse meat there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it's not something I would go and want to eat. A bachelor party I had gone to in Iceland, and I wanted to also check out, what do they eat there? It's Iceland, what grows there? Ice, how are they going to do this? But
Right.
It's a big seafood culture. I went there, and I'm like, okay, everybody order for me, and they did. And I on the menu were, this big slab of beef and this bird, and I ate it, and it was absolutely delicious, and it turned out to be whale meat and puffin.
Yes.
I started to realize that a lot of people think that everything that swims in the ocean have gills and scales. No, these are mammals. These are breathing animals like land animals are. And the whale meat is a fatty, think of like a whole piece of meat just filled with fat and having like a ribeye on steroids type of situation. What I like to think about is that, traveling to whaling places all over the world, whether it's New Zealand and, Maine and even here in California, it's a success story. We actually save them. So when you think of human beings getting together, especially the Mexican government, by making Scammons Lagoon, that's where all of the whales were. They could have been easily wiped out in a couple of seasons. We did save them. And now there's this environmental battle on population control. And there are some species that are still dying off. And there's all this controversy with Japan still hunting them. The Native Americans, they do hunt them because they've been hunting them for an enormous amount of time. And, they're hunting with spears and boats. They're not going out there with commercial means. And then you have Iceland, who's been doing the same. There is international conventions on them. When you look at Greenpeace, whether you like them or not, they did have a huge effect on lifting the whale populations.
Why aren't we using that as an example? Let me try this. As an example that we can save other species. And then why don't we turn the mirror at ourselves and say, well, if we're looking at the species themselves, we wouldn't have this problem if we were supporting a more local, focused, sustainable fisherman. That small boat that goes out, not that giant boat that has the contract, that fifth generation of fisherman or fisherwoman that is going out to sea. Why are we focused on that as much?
I have another question about this. There was once offshore of California, the sardine, and that Steinbeck wrote, Cannery wrote, was very famous. I mean, that was where most of the cat and dog food came from way back in the day, and they overfished it, and a lot of it disappeared. Has any of it come back? Have you seen them? Because sardines are so tasty. I don't know, when they're fried, they're absolutely delicious. People don't like them. They can't stand them. I don't know why.
Because they became a canned item.
Yeah.
And I think the canning of certain things turned people off.
Rancid, yeah.
Yeah, there's a guy in Half Moon Bay, and he's a fisher. He's out there fishing crabs and other stuff. But they net sardines right there on the dock, and you'll get these notifications that you can buy 5-10 pounds of fresh sardines. To me, that's fantastic. There's so much you can do. Even when they're fresh and they're still kicking around, you fry them real quick, they're delicious. I love them. Well, who was it? I can't remember the restaurant that was calling them fries with eyes. That was pretty cool. I kind of wanted to steal it, but the idea. But it's kind of true. And I don't know what happened. The mackerel went the same way. Abalone is another good story.
Yes.
You know, I mean, abalone, there's these Central Coast in the kelp farms was just, we took too much of it, right?
Yeah.
And it ended up killing some of these kelp forests in the sea, and thus goes away the California giant bass. So abalone is now regulated. You can't dive for it. And then they reopened the season. I'm talking 10 years later. And there's a diver I met doing this thing in San Diego, this sustainable seafood pit in San Diego. And the diver says he's down there and he's looking at all this abalone. He's like, hey, it's back. This is amazing. And right next to him swims like a 3-meter long giant California white bass, which was thought to be extinct. He's like, oh, they're back too.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the realization that there is this symbiosis, this relationship between everything in the sea, and that's why sustainability matters the most.
It does.
You know? It's like you take one thing away, you're harming others in the process. So
I go a lot to Baja, California, and it's an enormous seafood paradise down there, from gooey duck to lobster all over the place down there, chocolate clams, a lot of clams down there. Why doesn't it get up here? Like, it's so close. It's like a less than a truck away. Why doesn't it get up here? Because it all goes to Asia. The vast majority of all that seafood, it gets trucked to LAX, and there's just plane loads filled with Pacific lobster, gooey duck. All of that seafood is heading over to Asia, and it's just, people don't realize that.
Oh, wow. I mean, you think about, there's certain things like the Maine lobster fishery, right? The coast is pretty long, but in the sea, but that's such a specific fishery, but it goes everywhere.
I mean, you know, lobsters are basically the cockroaches of the sea.
That's true.
They come back, and as long as it's sustainable, they're just going to keep multiplying mass and come back and come back and come back.
They're resilient too. They're tougher than they look as well, you know. So it drives me a little bit crazy, because I also have a ton of respect for something that's survived. So, for example, there's some guy in Massachusetts, I saw this on some social media thing, where this guy pulls out a 30-pound lobster off the coast of Massachusetts, and the comments are like, oh, it's going to feed a village. It's like, put her back.
Yeah.
That sucker's been alive longer than I have, you know, and I'm not very young anymore. So, like, you know, a little respect there. No, they're pretty amazing creatures, and they're also delicious.
Okay, so you've got an enormous amount of fish coming into this country that's basically grown in a pen. What I think and what I've seen is this farm-raised fish, what people don't understand is it's not eating what it's supposed to be eating historically and genetically. It's eating pellets. What's in that food that's feeding these fish?
Chicken. Because fish, Mother Nature had it intended for fish to eat chicken. No, this is a topic. First of all, fish eating chicken leads to just because it looks like a fish and smells like a fish, it's no longer a fish. This frankenfish that we're talking about also has another doozy of a byproduct, and that's those tanks, that on-land tanks, and all that water that spills over that affects our groundwater. That offsets the on-land ecosystem. There's that. And if you're going to buy this stuff, how about the local fishermen? Now you're taking money out of their pockets.
Yeah.
To me, you can do the science and the math and say these are good replacements, because then we won't be depleting the supplies in our ocean. Stop buying one thing and open your mind to other options, and then we don't need tanks of fish on land. You know, they did a seeding tank for Alaskan salmon, and they bred them on land. They put them in the bays, and these fish had nowhere to go, and they all died. Why? Because they weren't part of the ecosystem. They weren't part of nature. They were these weirdos that were eating chicken and hanging out in the woods. And then they were sent to where they're supposed to be, and they didn't know which rivers to run. And so they all died. Great project. Not only a waste of time and money, but that just goes to show you there's certain things we shouldn't, well, there's quite a few things, but in this situation, Mother Nature always wins. And she'll get you back. Don't mess with her.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen so many fish farms around the world, and I would actually go and smuggle out the pellets and have it tested. In a lot of locations, and to see what in the world they are feeding this fish. And I mean, so many Bronzino that are on every menu. That's all farm stuff from the Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the fresh local stuff is kept for, the good. kept
For those that
them.
matter.
Yeah.
What's in the pellets? Can you tell us?
Well,
A couple.
a lot of the pellets are just stuff from human remains. So they're actually going into cesspools and septic systems
Jesus.
and just feeding the crap that humans are doing back into the food chain.
Here, I thought chicken was bad.
But that's
Lord.
expensive.
Yeah,
Chicken's
I guess.
expensive.
So you're eating grandpa, essentially.
Yeah.
What the hell just happened here?
You talk about what comes around goes around. That's
part of it.
So
Yeah.
you're eating the fish, and then that is going
Good.
back to feeding the fish again.
My Lord.
But then there are other parts of the world that are more clean and do it really, really legitimately. But I totally agree with you. You eat something farmed, and it's really not labeled. Even people don't know where it's really coming from at all.
Because we don't have to.
Yeah.
In this country, our labeling laws are weak.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also part of the problem. How are people supposed to care if they don't know? And if they know and things are properly labeled, it might invite the question. And if the question then invites just a hair of discovery, then they find out that they're eating grandpa. They might say, you know what, maybe I'm going to try something from this guy just a few miles away who has a fishing rod in his hand versus this craziness.
What's happened here in the American culture where we're so afraid of bones and we're so afraid of a head of a fish when you serve it? Just people don't like that.
No.
What happened?
I don't know. It's a great question because I serve whole fish at the restaurant.
Yes.
And once upon a time, I was getting beaten up by the media because my portions were too small, so I decided I'd do big things, and I roasted a whole suckling pig. And the San Francisco Giants happened to be playing, so I stuck the pig in the window of my kitchen so you could see it when you walked in, and I put a Giants cap on it. Go Giants. Now, in the fine dining world, that's not what you're supposed to do. The backlash was crazy. People came, how dare you do that? How dare? I'm like, what? You're going to eat it anyway. I'll wash that. You can have it. I don't know. The whole notion of seeing the whole form of an animal and not kind of understanding that it's the same thing, whether it's spare ribs or chicken fingers or whatever. It comes from there. So what's the mystery? Yeah, no, it's just the notion of not understanding the origin of what we eat. Where does it come from? That's something that needs some work. Because if we spent more time thinking about the source and how it gets to us, we'd care more about the steps along the way. We'd have better environmental awareness and maybe practices. And ideally, we'd be keeping the stocks and the levels in the sea high and where they should be, and we'd be supporting the local fishermen. And there you go. I mean, that's a little utopian, but a boy can dream.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm with Matthew Dolan, one of the great chefs here in San Francisco in the U.S. It's such a pleasure to be here. A joyful chef, which is so great to see.
Life is too short. And John, thank you. Keep up the good work, and I always look forward to seeing you when you come through town. So thank you for having me on the show.
My pleasure. Let's see what the cat drags in now.
All right, first show in the books. Hi, everyone. I'm John's producer, AJ. That's great chatting with Matthew Dolan. What do you think about the show, John?
Oh, just the guy's just phenomenal. Such a legend. And to know someone like that personally, to have a laugh and be joyful and learn all about the knowledge and sophistication of such a fine chef and what he does. What a blast. Life is good.
I agree. I think, he had I know he's got his book coming out, or maybe it is already out, but it was, it was great to learn, just cooking seafood does not need to be so scary. I think especially Americans are just so scared by it. I'm here with my wife in Mexico, especially where we are. We cook, this Puerto Vallarta, this town runs on seafood. I mean, I can't imagine being afraid of it. What kind of, I'm sure you're a big seafood eater. What kind of stuff do you like to cook for yourself?
I love a good piece of salmon, but not farmed, like wild salmon. They just love getting a good sear on the pan, crispy skin. And even once in a while, I like doing a miso glaze, it's just so delicious and good for you. I also love razor clams. They're so delicious when you, cook them, a little bit of garlic, a little bit of olive oil, and those thin razor clams. If you can find them, I mostly get them out of northern Italy, and you peel them back with a fork. It's just so delicious. Obviously, you got to have it fresh. And the problem in the U.S. is everything's frozen now because you have these large corporations that have to get things through the supply chain. And it's easier to freeze something than to put it through a fresh, cold supply chain. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I only time I've ever had razor clams was in Barcelona, as they say, with my wife. I mean, I've never seen it out in the U.S. Have you ever ran into it in L.A. before? Ran into them?
No. I mean, I've seen them kind of bunched up in some seafood markets, mostly in San Francisco, but they're flown in from, somewhere, even Scotland. I've been to Scotland and I've seen just delicious razor clams. And you know what? I actually like a little bit of parsley on there, just mainly chopped parsley with the garlic and olive oil. Just really elevates that dish.
Is it cooked or is it like ceviche style, like cooked in acid or just raw?
It's not raw. It's cooked. So it's kind of in a pan, they put it in a pan and cook it in the pan and elevate it and then add, there's a restaurant called Il Galeone, in Venice that I like when I go there, I have to eat those razor clams first before I do anything else. Otherwise I'm just bitter and angry and vicious to anybody that comes. It's like just something like that.
I mean,
for my whole life.
And so good, so good for you. Shellfish just phenomenal. What isn't good for you? I was shocked. I mean, you kind of dropped a bomb on us at the end there. But I mean, fish food pellets. Those are really human remains, or was that a joke, or that's really true?
It's true. I mean, you think about it. These fish are farmed. They cannot go out in the wild and catch fish on their own. So you have to feed those fish, and it's very expensive. Just like, a baby can't go out and find its food. A mother has to feed the babies. And so what's going on here with these fish? What are you feeding them? So people are cutting corners with disgusting, ways of having fish eat things that you and I would never eat. And think about that fish is eating those pellets that consists of everything from human excrement, to trash, to all of these things where it goes into these pellets. The fish eat it and it becomes part of their innards and their structure. It's just horrific. That bronzino, that Mediterranean sea bass that you think is coming from the wild, clear islands off the coast of the Peloponnese. It's coming from fish.
It's so important, where your food is coming from. I mean, the wise person once told me, "You are what you ate." And unfortunately, it's so hard to find exactly what that is all the time. But we're a composition of what we ate. But speaking of what we ate, the foods that really resonate with us, that help us out, physically and mentally as well. What's the last thing, maybe last week, what's the last thing you've had that really mattered to you? The last food item, dish that you really, really resonated with?
I had this dish that was prepared for Iranian New Year's just the other day. And it was rice that was cooked in this large pan. And I looked at it and it looked like squid ink. Like, gosh, they put all that squid ink in the rice. No, it was pomegranate juice over this rice. And it's an ancient recipe, an ancient Persian recipe. So you are eating history. And it was so delicious because that rice, in the combination of the protein, which some cases it was a scallop, in other cases it was a chicken or steak, and the vegetable, it just elevated the dish so much. And I've never seen it, never had it, and it was phenomenal, just phenomenal. Rice looked black, but it was because of pomegranate juice did that.
I mean, I feel like I can taste that, taste that through the video. Pomegranate juice is such a amazing addition to have. I mean, the last thing that I had too that was in that same world and out here in Mexico, just an amazing papaya. Like you just can't get papayas like this outside of tropical regions. I mean, just the simple things: pomegranate, papaya. You don't need to have too much complexity. You know, it's good. It's a good reminder to take a second and enjoy simple, basic things because they can be the most explosive at the end of the day.
You're right. And the reason for that is because when papayas grow in tropical latitudes. In the U.S., papayas don't grow up here, so that has to be transported. So what they have to do is pick that papaya so far from it being ripened on the tree. So it's actually getting its sugars after it's been picked from the tree as it's being transported. Disgusting, right? Yeah. But when that papaya is ripened on the tree and it has its motherly sugars being added to it naturally by the sun, picked and put into your mouth, it's a whole nother world. And that's why food tastes so good in those parts of the world for that reason.
Longer time on vine, right? Longer time on vine, longer time in nature, or longer time in the ground. Yeah. Awesome, John. Well, amazing first episode. Thanks again to Matthew Dolan, Chef Matthew Dolan, wonderful guest. And we'll see you guys on the next one.
See you in a bit. The executive producers of Foods That Matter are AJ Mosley and Stuart Halpern. Editing by AJ Mosley. Marketing by Katrin Skapurtis. Music by Jenny G. And I'm your host, John Sutton. And until our next journey, stay hungry.